My Gavana Melanin, welcome back to my channel with part 3 of Kindness of Elves. And today I am going to be reading the parts of basically everything that the elves have said as an example of their kindness in the Return of the King book. So this is the third book. And, well, actually it's not the third, but it's separated into 3 movies, but it's not really a trilogy. So I'm going to begin with Return of the King. So the first part is when Legolas was the first to volunteer to go with Aragorn to Minas Tirith, and Aragorn said he would go and anyone who wanted to go with me. And Legolas said, "I, for one," Legolas said enthusiastically. And it shows that he was never afraid to volunteer first. And I think that it showed a type of loyalty, which is a form of kindness. And the second part is where he says, so here's this part here where, where is this one? Oh, so at this part, he is Hallobared with a gift for Aragorn. He says, "It is a gift I bring you from the Lady of Rivendell. She wrought it in secret, and long was the making, but she also says words to you. The days now are short. Either our hope cometh, or all hopes end. Therefore I send thee what I have sent for thee. Farewell, Elfstone." So the Helbered, or the Helbered, is basically like a sheath for the sword. And so his Anduril, which is the sword that was actually put together back again for Aragorn, she had kind of a sheath for him that is very special in that it won't break the sword. And also, there also was the elf stone that Arwen left for him in Lothlorien when she was last there. In the movie, it's a little bit different. Arwen gives the Even Star to Aragorn, but it's actually the Elf Stone, which is an emerald green stone or a beryl stone, and beryl comes in forms of aquamarine or emerald and some other forms. But it's known as the Elf Stone, and she left it for him. So Galadriel is basically, sending him a gift from afar. And it shows once again that the elves always kind of went above and beyond in their helping of the fellowship. And here is a little bit more on it. It was the livery of Elendil, which she wove from black cloth, decorating it with mithril, gems, and gold. The livery were a number of symbols used by Gondor of old. So the other thing that Arwen did was in Rivendell, she actually wove this black cloth with symbols of Gondor on it for him. So once again, there's lots of gifts and presents that are coming to Aragorn from afar, just to let him know that Arwen is thinking of him and has always been thinking of him. And also Galadriel is also supportive of him as well, and also the whole fellowship too. So you see that there's this generosity of the elves, and there's more examples of that come in later. Number 3 is, meanwhile, Merry asks where Aragorn went, and Legolas replied, "In a high chamber of the burg. He has neither rested nor slept. I think he went thither hours ago to take thought. He took Helbered with him, but some dark doubt or care sits on him." So now you see that this is an interesting time where you see that Legolas notices that Aragorn is trying to leave basically and go for a thought that he wouldn't normally be able to have in company with the others. And Legolas notices that he has not rested nor slept. So that's another type of conscientious behavior of Legolas that we see as an example of what Tolkien wrote the elves to be like. They were very conscientious, very aware beings, not only of themselves, but of others. And if you watch the other parts, part 1 and part 2, there's a ton of examples where Legolas is deemed that kind of the eyes of the group, and the eyes not just so much to see, clearly into the distance and watch out for things, but also to see if the others in the groups are needing anything, if there's anything that, that they need as far as more food or sleep or, just comfort. He always had his eyes everywhere in that way. And oh, yes, I just wanted to go back here. So the first part, my notes were a little scribbled here, and it says he is with Halbered. So I was thinking that was the sheath, but actually Halbered was a man that he met in Rohan. So so actually this is just basically saying that it was the livery of Elendil that Arwen brought, and he already received the sheath for the sword in the last part when he went to Lothlorien. So sorry about that, but there's so many gifts that the elves gave to everyone that it's hard to keep track of sometimes. Tolkien made sure that, the elves are kind of known for their gift giving, as well as the hobbits too, because they had that custom where they gave gifts on their birthdays to everybody in the Shire. But the elves really kind of went above and beyond, giving some really valuable gifts to the Fellowship. So anyway, sorry about that. I made that mistake there. But number 4 is where Gimli actually remarks how mysterious and silent Halbered is and the other Duendine are. But even as Aragorn, they are courteous if they break their silence. And have you marked their brethren, Elodan and Elrohir? They are fair and gallant as elven lords. And that is not to be wondered at in the sons of Elrond or Rivendell. So this is where actually Legolas says this, and he says that, yes, but the Duendine, who are actually long descendants of men and elves, kind of interbreeded and part of the Numenor, which no longer really exists, but it was a land where the elves and the men could actually come together. And Aragorn is from a long line of actually the same line of Melian, and so he has elf blood in him, but he's also very much a man. And so there is this whole thing where Legolas is regarding the Duendine as also being, courteous, and they're just as, full of courteousness and integrity as the elven lords themselves. And also he gives a compliment to Elrond of Rivendell and his sons, Elodan and Elrohir, and Gimli tells Merry why they have come to. They answered a summon, as you heard. Word came to Rivendell, and they say Aragorn has need of his kindred. Let the Duodine ride to Rohan. So now you see that Elrond actually sent his sons and sent a few elven folk out to help Aragorn, and actually basically sent call to the Duodine, and that's why they met in Rohan. So you see this once again, this courteous action of Elrond to extend forward to help Aragorn. And I put a note here, Gladriel was one who sent it, Legolas said. So it was Gladriel, and then she told Elrond, and then Elrond then sent everybody over to Aragorn. So once again, you always have elves looking out for you in high places. And, if they deem you as someone that is their friend or that is good for Arda, then they will help and support you in your journey. And this is a true testament of that. So Aragorn meets with them after parting with Éomer, and Aragorn sat silent in the burg, which is the dinner hall of Rohan, and Legolas then says, "Come, speak and be comforted, and shake off the shadow. What has happened since we come back to the grim place in the gray morning?" So once again, Legolas is that caring, nurturing soul in the Fellowship, and he can see that Aragorn is sitting in silence. He's not speaking, and Legolas is trying to say, well, come on, shake off the shadow. Let's talk. Let's figure out what's going on with you. He shows great concern for Aragorn, and Aragorn talks about his ordeal and the paths of the dead, which is where he is heading to next. So Legolas, Gimli, and a whole band of Duodyne and the Rohan riders, they all decide to go with him to the paths of the dead. And as they enter the area of the dead, the Duodyne riders and their horses were trembling with fear. And Arhad, the horse of Rohan, refused the way and stood sweating and frightened. That was grievous to see, Tolkien writes here. And Legolas laid his hand on his eyes, on the horse's eyes, and sang some words that were soft in the gloom until he relaxed enough to be let in by him. So there you see, the kindness to animals is above and beyond humans. There's almost this telepathic connection, and I'll go more into that when we get into that video topic on the Elven nature of treatment of animals. But Legolas is shown this kind of gentleness towards the horses, and they're having a hard time going into this area where the path of the dead is. But it was Legolas who Tolkien wrote as an example of that elven nature, very connected to animals and able to soothe the horse. And then 7 is the morning after the battle, when Éowyn and Merry were saved, Legolas and Gimli begged to leave early to see Merry and Pippin. Legolas remarks of Gondor, "They need more gardens. The houses are dead, and there is too little that grows and is glad. If Aragorn comes into his own, the people of the wood shall bring him birds that sing and trees that do not die." So there you see, after this is far after into basically the battle that happened, and Éowyn and Merry were part of that. And now they're in Gondor, and now they are actually remarking about, the town of Gondor, the kingdom of Gondor, and Legolas is showing that, his kindness to nature goes above and beyond, where he notices that Gondor is lacking that type of life and that vibrancy. And he says that if Aragorn becomes king of Gondor and it comes into his own, then my people will bring all the birds, will bring all the trees that will never die, so that we can beautify this place and, bring life to it, bring nature to it. So that's an example of kindness, is when you're, extending, your gifts to others in order to brighten them up, not just to give them something that's a necessity, but something that you feel will cheer them up or brighten their day. And Legolas really wanted to brighten and fill Gondor with life. So Tolkien wanted to make that point with Legolas. So then they come to Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth, where he basically is a prince of this line of men and elves that have interbred. So it's part of Numenor, or what used to be Numenor. And often elves were known to keep to their own kind. That's kind of what they were known as on Arda. They were kind, especially if you were deemed as a friend to them, but they would kind of keep to their own kind. We learned that in the Stoicism videos, where Tolkien kind of mirrored that behavior, is that the elves, as the wisest beings on Middle Earth, as well as Gandalf and some of the other wizards, they did not like to lower themselves by hanging out with those that had a lower kind of uncouth behavior, or, like they wouldn't hang out with the humans that were barbaric towards each other, because it's kind of lowering your own expectation of yourself, and it's not really a role model to you. So they would only really hang out with their own kind. And so they were not really seen with dwarves. And this is when Prince Imrahil kind of found it really odd that Legolas was with Gimli. However, Legolas clearly announced to Prince Imrahil, "I am one of the 9 companions who set out with Mithrandil from Ilmadris, and with this dwarf, my friend, I come with Aragorn." So you see this ability for Legolas to call Gimli his friend very openly, especially to this high and kind of mighty character of Prince Imrahil. And he says, "This dwarf is my friend." And it shows that elves don't care what they look like. And they're the type of character that would be in high school. So say someone was bullying another, okay? They would probably go up to the bully and say something. They would stand up for others, and they wouldn't care what they themselves looked like or what others thought of them. I mean, Legolas does not care what this prince thinks of him having a friend as a dwarf, which is something that has been unheard of for ages. I mean, this is something really, really just kind of shocking to many that have elven blood or are the elves as themselves. And it just shows that there's a type of nature within elves that just, they really are the epitome of cool in that idea, where they just don't care what they look like, and they do always what is right or what they feel is right. And you can definitely bet that the elves would have your back, if you're somebody that they see as pure and innocent and is being bullied or being assaulted by others, or maybe just doesn't have a friend. The elf will come by and say, "You're my friend," and that's their type of personality. So I think people who think that elves are arrogant or they're haughty, or I don't think that they're actually reading Tolkien's books, because when you actually read the way that he wrote the elven character, it's different from the movie. Although the movie does a great job, but there is a type of arrogance or haughtiness, sometimes unapproachableness, that the movie shows the elves as having, and that's not really what the elves were. And Tolkien was very clear about that. Even Gladriel, I mean, even Celeborn, even those elves of very high stature still are those types that would stick up for someone, or they wouldn't care what they look like if they can be a guardian to others and can help others in need. It's just truly, I think, a brave statement of Tolkien to make. It's something that I think everybody could aspire to being, because if we were all like the elves more, we probably wouldn't have bullying going on as long, because we would have people that would stand up for others and be like, "That person's my friend." You may think they're a dork or a dweeb or a nerd, or you may think something about them, but this is my friend. I call this person my friend, and they're not lonely anymore, And I think that that is what Tolkien was trying to make the elven character as. Someone that seems almost impossibly cool, and at the same time approachable and friendly. It is a beautiful balance that Tolkien created with Legolas. So I'll keep going. And then Legolas says, "But we now wish to see our friends, Meriadoc and Peregrine, who are in your keeping, we are told." Imrahil tells them that they are indeed in the House of Healing of Gondor. So once again, very strange, Legolas is saying, "I have friends who are Merry and Pippin." They're hobbits. And I mean, it's just such a bold thing. I love Legolas's character, and Tolkien was, I just think that he had such fun building this type of character in the elven nature of Legolas and showing that. It was just wonderful to see. Next one is, so Legolas is not short on compliments, even with Aragorn when talking to Imrahil, and he says, "That is a fair lord, and a great captain of men," said Legolas about Imrahil. "If Gondor had such men still in these days of fading, great must have been its glory in the days of its rising." So, I mean, Legolas is that type of character that just will give a compliment to anyone. I mean, if they deem someone really cool, really full of integrity, and someone kind and fair, I mean, the elves are going to let you know. They're going to have your back, and they are going to brighten up your day. They're not going to keep those compliments to themselves. Legolas is very free to give it and says, hey, Prince Imrahil is actually a really great guy as well. And it's a really wonderful thing to see. Then Gimli says, "It is ever so with the things that men begin. There is a frost in spring or a blight in summer, and they fail of their promise." And Legolas says, so he sticks up for humans. Okay, this is important. So Gimli the dwarf is kind of brooding, and he's like, I don't know about humans. They always say one thing and do the other. And Legolas says, "Yet seldom do they fail of their seed," said Legolas, "and that will lie in the dust and rot to spring up again in times and places unlooked for. The deeds of men will outlast us, Gimli." And Gimli said, "And yet come to naught in the end, but might have beens, I guess." And then Legolas just says, well, "To that the elves know not the answer." So then Gimli is saying, well, yeah, but we don't know what the ending of mankind will be like. Are they going to become more barbarous, and are they going to kill each other off? Are they going to worship Sauron? Are they going to cut down the forest? You know, Gimli is basically asking these questions in this very poetic way because he doesn't trust humans. And Legolas is like, yeah, but even the elves don't know what's going to happen and what the humans will do in the end. You know, our age is over, and here the humans are coming. And, well, we just don't know. So, you know, don't be so gloomy, Gimli. And then the next part is, next, Legolas gets overly emotional due to hearing the seagulls cry and feeling a pull on his soul about sailing west. And the others say, "Don't go." So then Gimli is actually hearing the seagulls around the west, well, basically calling him out to the west from the Gondor ports and you know, around basically where they are right now, looking out over the ocean or the sea. And he's feeling this kind of pull in him, and Galadriel kind of warned him that when you hear the birds call, you know, this is going to call to you. So just be aware of that, because this is something that elves will feel in them, is kind of a longing to go home to Valinor or to return back to the place where they, you know, originated from. And so Legolas is kind of feeling like an emotional pull on himself, and he's like, oh, you know, one day I'll have to leave. And Gimli says this. Gimli says, "He was held by the will of Aragorn to the journey." So Gimli is basically giving this thing like, he's like, well, I came so far, I was held by the will of Aragorn to finish this journey. And Legolas replies and says, "And by the love of him also," said Legolas, "for all those who come to know him come to love him after his own fashion." And then he says, "Even Eowyn grieved, and I grieved to behold it. Alas, I had heart only for myself," said Gimli. "Nay, I will not speak any more." So Legolas, there's a lot happening here. So he's emotional at this point, hearing the seagulls. And Gimli is saying, yes, I came on this journey. And then Legolas is like, well, yes, but it's also the love of Aragorn. So once again, Legolas is showing this extremely open, emotional vulnerability to be able to talk about love openly of another man. I mean, Legolas does not have feelings for Aragorn romantically, but he's able to talk about, what do we call it, brotherly love. He's able to say, no, but you love Aragorn as I love Aragorn, and everybody who meets Aragorn, they fall in love with him because of the man that he is, the integrity that he has. And he even said, even Eowyn, when she had to kind of learn of his leaving and, you know, how she would never be with him, she also grieved. And he said, and it touched my heart. Like he said, I grieved to actually behold her grieving. And what I said in the notes here is that Tolkien made Legolas an empathic character who could feel the sadness of others, who could feel the emotions of others. Empathy is I think it's a super extreme form of kindness, because kindness is like doing acts and extending your effort out towards others. And empathy is something that someone cultivates when they are just very open to receiving more information about others. They're more open to looking into the emotional makeup of others, and they absorb the feelings of others. They absorb the emotions, the energies of others around them. And so Legolas even said, I grieved because she was grieving. So it shows that all elves generally have this empathic ability. And I talked about it in another video I did, I think last year, called Elves Are Empaths. Tolkien wanted to write that down. Now, was Tolkien himself an empath? I think he did have that part of him to be able to create this kind of character or this species, but it's something that is very, it's always there in kind of fairy tales and folklores about the elves and fairies. If you look into the old legends, they can come up to someone that's crying or grieving. They can kind of feel what others are feeling. So when someone has an elven soul or a fairy soul, a lot of times you would say they're empathic, they're an empath. They can actually read into the energies of animals as well as humans. So that is also something that I think brings in the element of kindness into elves, because they are empathic. I believe that you can cultivate this ability. I don't believe that you're just born as an empath, although I think that it's a certain type of consciousness block that you can have within you. But I do believe in cultivating it, and it's something that you could just kind of open yourself up to more, to having. And of course, empaths do have to have their types of boundaries set as well, so they don't feel the emotional pull of the entire world all the time, because that could really drive you crazy, and you can go up and down in a roller coaster of emotions. But I will get more into that in another video, I promise. As I did these videos, I started coming up with all these other videos and topics, and what I'm going to focus on with the Elven Light University, which is how to teach humans how to be more like their elven nature that is naturally within them. And I will keep going here. So Tolkien made Legolas an empath, and we see that in a lot of other types of elven characters. We see it in Arwen, we see it in Gladriel. So we can definitely bet that Tolkien had a very strong sense of understanding that the elves would naturally be empathic. And it has something to do with being connected to nature, because nature is an empathic organism in a way, like trees, plants. They sense things around them, and they're able to adjust to their ecosystem that they're in and their environment that they're in. So naturally, anyone that is connected to nature is also going to be empathic as plants and animal life, because we know animals are extremely sensitive. I mean, they can definitely read your energy. They know when someone's a threat. They know when someone means them no harm. So I believe that that's really the connection between elves and empathy, is also their connection to nature as well. But we'll get more into that in another video. This next part is when Pippin and Merry begged for more news, and because at this point, Gimli says, "I will not speak of this anymore. I had only a heart for myself." So here's where we see a little bit of, I love the dwarves as much as I love hobbits, but there's a type of downfall which Tolkien wrote about with the dwarves, is that they're selfish. They tend to only think about themselves. They don't really know how to extend themselves outward. Gimli was very different in that he was a dwarf coming out of his shell, coming out of his small self ego and branching out and connecting to others. But the dwarves, they lived underground and they mined for gold and jewels, and they were known to be a selfish species. I mean, that's what Tolkien wrote them as. There's many examples of that, but there's always exceptions to the rules depending on the individual, like Gimli. But Gimli even says, "I had only heart for myself. I didn't grieve for Eowyn. I didn't even think about that. I was just pulled onto this journey, and it's been hard and it's been difficult, and you better stay with me now, Legolas." That's kind of what Gimli was saying. And so he says, "I'm not going to speak about it anymore." And Pippin and Merry, the little hobbits, they were like, "Oh, please tell us about your journey. What have you seen? What have you done?" And Pippin and Merry begged for more news, that at last Legolas said, "I will tell you enough for your peace. For I felt not the horror, and I feared not the shadows of men, powerless and frail as I deemed them." So now Merry and Pippin, they're asking about, what was the path of dead like? What were these ghost men like? And this is when he's like, "Well, I'm going to tell you, just kind of, give you peace and comfort." Once again, Legolas is extending himself out. He didn't have to tell the news. He could have remained quiet like Gimli, especially since he was kind of in an emotional state, actually, because he was already in this paragraph. He was hearing the calls of the seagulls. He was kind of feeling like a pull towards the west. He also was talking about Eowyn and grieving for her. He was talking about his love for Aragorn and everybody's love for Aragorn. And then he even extends himself further, even kind of out of being emotionally exhausted. He's still kind of placated, and he basically, he put himself out there and told the story for Merry and Pippin, even though he himself has already been through a lot. And I think Tolkien's choice with that was to show that there's a selflessness of elves that they represent. Whereas dwarves represent the selfishness, elves represent the selflessness. And that is really because they are kind of moving away from Arda. They're sailing away, they're fading away in a way, and it's the end of their age. So with Tolkien writing that, his choice was to show that selflessness, when you give up your needs for others, not in a way that sacrifices yourself, but in a way of, like, you overextend yourself, or you don't really care about how your comfort is, but you want to make others comfortable. It's a mark of an old soul. It's somebody that is ready to move on from Earth, because you're not so about your own selfish needs anymore. It's like you've done that, you've been there, done that. The elves have already kind of lived that type of life. So this age, the third age, the last age, is one in which they believe that they should kind of live for others, or they should extend themselves out for others as kind of a last, sentiment towards life. So you see that with Legolas, and I think that was a very conscious choice on Tolkien's part. I think that he himself was an old soul, And I believe that that truly is what he was actually going for, is the idea that I think Tolkien was trying to say that he put himself out there, he wrote this book and these tales for others, and he did it out of a, not of a discomfort for himself, but kind of like anybody who I guess puts their own needs aside in order to make humanity more comfortable is somebody that has already lived many lives and is conscious of it, is aware of it, and is ready to kind of move on. So they're not so, invested in themselves as much as they are with others. That's why the elves represented a selflessness, giving of their most valuables, giving away their things to others as gifts, being hospitable in nature. It's a type of way of saying, like, we're done with this world. Now it's yours. Okay. So here's everything that we have learned. Here's everything that we have gained. We're done. And it's like you have less of a grasp on the world. The more that you pull away from it, the more that you're ready to move on from the world. And that's why the elves represented selflessness versus selfishness, because the dwarves still had many more ages, and they still were, they were not fading away like the elves were. So I think that that's a conscious choice with Tolkien to show there's this constant overextension of Legolas that you keep seeing. Like, he's exhausted, he's experienced this, he's done this, he's singing while they're sleeping, he's soothing them with his song, he's not sleeping, he's watching out for orcs. It happens with those that are just ready to move on. They don't really care about themselves as much as they do for the comfort of others. And you see that with Legolas very much. So he tells them of this. He says, I have no fear of the dead. Been there, done that. I have seen things in my life. And he's like, I just, nothing really makes me afraid. I feared not the shadows of men, powerless and frail as I deemed them. He knew that they didn't have true power over him. The darkness never does. So that's something that the elves, as well as having a selflessness, they also had a bravery, a fearlessness. And the fearlessness and the bravery is what brings out their kindness more, because they're not afraid to show their emotions. They're unafraid of ghosts and orcs and goblins and whatever else that Morgoth had corrupted and had created on Arda. But they are really, it's the stoic idea that the only thing that they fear is kind of losing their own sense of self, their integrity, and doing the things that, are not good, and they know it's not good for others. That's the only thing that they would be fearful of, is falling in their pride and forgetting who they are, inside. So Legolas has no fear. He's fearless, he's selflessness, showing with the Merry and Pippin at this point. It's at right here. I feared not the shadows of men, powerless and frail as I deemed them. So he obliged the little hobbits in the way the dwarf Gimli would not and could not. And there were much compliments to Aragorn during his story. I did not write everything down. As he was catching Merry and Pippin up on the events, he was also complimenting Aragorn a lot. And at last he ends with Gimli saying, for my part, like Merry, I wish that with our victory the war was now over. Yet, whatever is still to do, I hope to have a part in it for the honor of the folk of the Lonely Mountain. This is what the dwarf Gimli says. And Legolas said, and I for the folk of the Great Wood, and for the love of the Lord of the White Tree. Once again, he's admitting his love for Aragorn, very open emotionally to just put that out forward. I think that men could really learn from a character like Legolas. I mean, just brotherly love. It's good to show. It's really touching to see that, to openly, be vulnerable emotionally in that way. It's really a beautiful thing to see. And I pinpoint men because I know in society, the kind of the gender roles of men have caused them to be kind of not showing their emotions outwardly. And so it's very interesting for Tolkien to write this character around in the 30s and the 40s during this time when maybe you wouldn't see this, but he was definitely tapping into kind of the elven fey nature that is very open emotionally. And so he says, for the love of the Lord of the White Tree. Number 12. Next, we move on to Sam and Frodo traveling to Mordor, and there we learn more about the lembas bread given to them by the elves as an act of kindness and spreading of elven magic. So this is where we start to see that Sam and Frodo, they're really struggling. I mean, they're in the land of Mordor. They're struggling for water, and the only type of food that they have is lembas bread. And I wrote this down because I think that this is a testament to the type of way that the elves are. For it is said, lembas bread has a virtue without which they would long ago lain down to die. It did not satisfy full desire of Sam, like it wasn't a full meal that hobbits are used to, but it had a potency that increased as travelers relied on it alone, and did not mingle it with other foods. It fed the will, and gave strength to endure, and to master sinew and limb beyond the measure of mortal kind. So there you see this overextension of elves, this selflessness of elves to give of their gifts freely, to pass it down to those that they're leaving now, and to leave behind. They even are able to create it in the food that they make, that it's sustaining enough on its own, that it has this type of quality to it that will sustain everybody naturally who eats it, in a way that other full meals would, but it doesn't fulfill your desire. It's not a lustful type of meal. It's like a Nutri-Grain bar. It's simply going to just give you the energy that you need, and it fulfills you in a way that you won't need to have other types of food for many days. So you see this in Tolkien's writing about the way that the elves created their food. And this type of food was specifically for travelers. So not only for their elven guards who traveled, but also, I guess, anybody weary travelers who would come and they knew that they were going on long journeys, like Frodo and Sam. Number 13, after Frodo gets rid of the ring, so then we fast forward the whole thing with the Shiloh Blair, and beating the orcs, and then Gollum comes and he's basically harassing and attacking Frodo, and then eventually the ring is dropped into the fire of Mount Doom, and Frodo gets rid of the ring. We move to the ending after Arwen and Aragorn are married now in Gondor. And Frodo says he wants to visit Rivendell to see Bilbo. And Arwen then gives a gift to Frodo. And she says, "A gift I will give you, for I am the daughter of Elrond. I shall not go with him when he departs to the havens. For mine is the choice of Luthien, and as she, so have I chosen, both the sweet and the bitter. But in my stead you shall go, ring-bearer, when the time comes, and if you deserve it. If your hurt grieves you still, and the memory of your burden is heavy, then you may pass into the west, until all your wounds and weariness are healed. But wear this now in memory of Elfstone and Evenstar, with whom your life has been woven. and she took out off a white gem like a star, a necklace that lay upon her breast, hanging upon a silver chain, and set the chain around Frodo's neck. And she said, "When the memory of the fear and the darkness troubles you," she said, "this will bring you aid." And Arwen gives Frodo her ticket to sail west instead of her. How selfless is that? She knew that she was not going to be leaving Aragorn for a very long time, that she was going to stay with him. And this is interesting because it means that eventually she would have to find a way to sail west, because she kind of gave up her ticket in a way. But she said, if you feel like you can't really live this life after everything that you have done, she's empathic. She knows Frodo is, there's a pain, there's a wound in him that will not heal because of everything that he has endured for a little hobbit like that. She knows inside that he will eventually need some type of rest from everything that he has experienced. So how lovely of Arwen to be able to give that type of I guess healing to Frodo, to know that, if it gets to be too much to live out this life and you just really want to really relax, you really want to rest in peace, then you can sail and you can go to Valinor. And that's something that many hobbits are not able to do. So Arwen was inviting, I think that was a huge extension. And Tolkien, I think it's interesting that he made Arwen the character to do that. Whereas in the movie Galadriel, you see her more or less kind of invite, he just kind of invites himself on the ship, but the elves are in agreement, and you see that. But Arwen is basically just, she already knows. She knows that Frodo has endured a lot. And although, he's done his mission and now he can go back to the Shire, there's always going to be an option for him. So that is something that the movie did not show, that Frodo receives an even star necklace from Arwen. It is not Aragorn, but it was actually Frodo in the books. And I think that there's a powerful statement because it goes beyond just romantic love, which what the movie was trying to show, which is a beautiful choice too of Peter Jackson. But Tolkien was trying to show something else, that she's giving up a prized possession. I mean, we don't know how long the Even Star has been in her family heirloom and how long she has been wearing this, and it's probably her ticket of immortality in a way, and to sail west. I'd have to go into more information about the Even Star to know, but I think that Tolkien's choice to make her give that to a little hobbit was a really kind choice, really, truly, just a wonderful choice, because it had nothing to do with romantic love. It had nothing to do with feelings or intentions or agendas or anything like that. It was simply just to give this hobbit rest. I mean, she probably was channeling a little bit of Este of the Grey Havens, just to give the hobbit some rest and reprieve. Okay, so after she gives him the necklace, we move on to, I have a note here, elves are beings of their word. They have integrity. Legolas repaid his promises to Gimli and went with him to the glittering caves. And when they returned, he was silent, meaning he was well impressed. He could not really speak because he saw so much beauty down there. And Gimli said, and never before has a dwarf claimed a victory over an elf in a contest of words, said he. Now, therefore, let us go to Fangorn and set the score right. Because before, in the past, Legolas said, I'm going to go see the caves with you, Gimli. Will you go back to Fangorn Forest and see the trees with me? And Gimli, agreed. But it shows that Legolas was a man of his word. He kept to his word. He saw the glittering caves because he knew that it would mean so much for Gimli to have him go and see. There's something about sharing your pride or your joy with others, and then being somebody that doesn't say, oh no, that's your thing, that's just what you like, even if it's not your thing. I mean, Legolas is an elf. He doesn't really go underground. It's been a long time since the elves have even really mingled with the dwarves and even went into the underground caves of Moria. And, there's this type of way that Legolas is once again kind of showing that he's just being very selfless at this point. And he's just saying, it's not really my thing, but I'm going to go anyway. But he was impressed. It was probably very beautiful to see. And then I thought it was funny that Gimli said he beat an elf in contest of words. And then after speaking with Treebeard, actually, Legolas said, "Come, Gimli, now, by Fanghorn's leave, I will visit the deep places of the Entwood and see such trees as are nowhere else to be found in Middle-earth. You shall come with me and keep your word, and this we will journey on together to our own lands in Mirkwood and beyond." So after they go to the Fanghorn Forest and they see Treebeard, then Legolas is also extending his friendship even further and says, okay, so now we've been to Fanghorn Forest. Now I want you to come here with me and let's keep on journeying together and let's go all the way to Mirkwood now. I'll have you meet my father, the king, and then even beyond. Now, someone said, and I would have to go back, but someone said, I think I read this a while ago, that Legolas and Gimli went sailing west to Valinor with each other, and that's what they meant about beyond. But I have not found evidence of that yet. So that's something that maybe you could look into and see if they actually went to Valinor. Did they actually retire from Arda and leave Middle-earth? And is that what Legolas meant with and beyond? So the next part is Celeborn and Gladriel then say goodbye to Treebeard because now they're in Fanghorn Forest. And he bowed deeply 3 times and said, "It is sad that we meet at the ending, for the world is changing. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth, and I smell it in the air. I do not think we shall meet again." So actually Treebeard was the one who said this famous quote, which is what Gladriel said in the movie. And I completely forgot about that because Treebeard is the one that's actually noticing that the elves are leaving and that he won't see them again because the world has now changed. The ring is gone. It's a new age for man, so the elves are leaving. And the Ents, who are the guardians of the forest, they know that their time is also fading as well, as far as their spirits. That in the new age of man, trees will just be trees. And so they won't have the Ent spirit within the tree, or it's basically Tolkien saying that the fairies have left and all of fairy has left in moving on and fading away when humans have come to Earth. So he says, "I don't think we're going to meet again." And Celeborn says, I do not know. That's all Celeborn says. "I do not know, eldest." But Gladriel then says, "Well, not in Middle-earth, nor until the lands that lie under the wave are lifted up again. Then in the willow meads of Tessarinan we may meet in the spring. Farewell." And I'm getting my phone here because I wanted to read this poem. And the reason why she said this, and the reason why I consider it an act of kindness to Treebeard, is that Treebeard was singing a song, The Willow Meads of Tasarinan, is a song that was sung by him in February 29th in year 3019 as he strode through Fanghorn Forest, taking Merry and Pippin to his home of Welling Hall at the foot of the mountain Meteldras. And Treebeard had been telling the hobbits of the broad days in the First Age, when the forests were much more extensive, and after a bit of silence began chanting this song as he walked. So I'm not going to read you everything, but this is the song he said. In the willow meads of Tasaranen, I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and the smell of the spring. In Nan Tasaranen. And I said that was good. I wandered in summer in the elm woods of Osarion. Ah, the light and the music in the summer by the 7 rivers of Osari. And I thought that was best. To the beaches of Neldorith I came to the autumn. Ah, the gold and the red and the sign of leaves in the autumn. So you could read more his song when you go to Tolkien Gateway. But here's why I put that. She says, we will not meet again until the spring of Tasaranen. And Galadriel is basically, she does this a lot. Tolkien made her this type of character that would take something important of another and she would reiterate it, or she would actually, it's like mirroring others so that you form a better connection to others, because she was actually saying, we'll meet in this place that you sing about. It meant something personal to Treebeard. It's far more than just saying farewell and till we meet again. But she actually goes even beyond that and says, what you have been singing about, what is most precious to you, what you have been longing to see again, we'll see each other there. Some humans do that too in this world. And I've always thought of them as very conscientious people, that they could take something very special to another and paraphrase it or completely mirror it and speak about it themselves, or use it in a form of like maybe a casual conversation or a compliment towards someone. What it does is it shows that you're listening, that you know what is most precious to another, that you care about their pride, their joy, and what they find is appealing. Galadriel does this a lot. She actually does this to Sam as well, when she sees Sam, and I'll go into that. So Celeborn and Galadriel left Aragorn their blessings, and Galadriel said to Aragorn, Elfstone, she calls him, through darkness you have come to your hope, and have now all you desire. Use well the days. So she's saying, well, you're the Lesser, the man of hope for Arda. And she called him the Elfstone, which is also a jewel that he wears as well. And Celeborn says, kinsman, farewell. May your doom be other than mine, and your treasure remain with you till the end. Now, this is very interesting because now Celeborn is saying, kinsman, you are my kin. We are connected. We are bonded. He's saying this to Aragorn. And may your doom be other than mine, meaning may your ending be different. May you not have to just fade away from earth, but may there be something else to your ending of man. And your treasure remain with you till the end. Anything that you treasure and value, may it remain until the end of your days as well. This is a very big blessing coming from the elves, and almost like a recognition within Celeborn to see to say that the elves did not make the best choices in all the ages that they were on Arda, and that he was noticing that, and that he wants man to make better choices, that the age of man is coming. May your destiny, may your doom, in the idea of may your ending, that's what Tolkien meant, is like your ending, not your disaster, which is sometimes what doom can mean, but may your ending be different than ours. Beautiful blessing. And the next part, Saruman was actually still imprisoned for his treachery, and then he was let go at Orthanc, and now he was free, and they come upon him, Galadriel, Gandalf, kind of the wandering rest of them, like Elrond, and a few of them that were wandering together after they left Aragorn to go back to Gondor. They come upon Saruman, and he looked like an old beggar. And this is something that I think is really interesting here. So this is the danger of wizards, I guess. This is a difference between wizards and elves. Because elves are connected to nature, and they're not really human sorcerers or human wizards, and some of the wizards actually were more like Maiar. They were kind of lesser spirits of like the Maya, and they had powers and they were different than men. But what I think Tolkien was trying to say is that wizards, if they're not connected to nature, if they're connected only to magic, as far as making their will dominate on Arda and gathering things to themselves, that they will have a tendency to be led astray and go down a darker path. And Saruman was an example of this. So he's looking like a beggar now, and Saruman says he is seeking for a way out of the realm now. So he's trying to leave, and Gandalf says, Will you scorn our help? For we offer it to you. And this is what makes Gandalf a different type of wizard, is that he's Gandalf the White, and he was also Gandalf the Gray, but he was always very connected to those nature beings like the elves. He was always part of that, and there's something about him that always is kind of keeps him on the right path, because he's working for this bigger part in, I guess, Eru's theme, where the light triumphs over the darkness. And so he's offering help to Saruman, even though Saruman has done terrible things. And Saruman mocks him and says something about Galadriel in front of her. He says, "To me, nay, pray, do not smile at me. I prefer your frowns. And as for the lady here, I do not trust her. She has always hated me and schemed for your part. I do not doubt that she has brought you this way to have the pleasure of gloating over my poverty. Had I been warned of your pursuit, I would have denied you the pleasure." And Galadriel finally speaks and extends her hand and says, "Saruman, we have other errands and other cares that seem to us more urgent than hunting for you. Say rather that you are overtaken by good fortune, for now you have a last chance." But Saruman only became more mean and cruel, mocking their help. So then you see Galadriel. I mean, even though he's talking about this with her, it shows that he didn't really know Galadriel at all, and that she never spoke badly about him. She never plotted or schemed. He simply, your perception of someone a lot of times will come from your own types of fears that you have within. It's your subconscious coming out, and you're projecting an image on others rather than actually knowing who another person really is. And people do that a lot, and Saruman is an example of that. He's like, "Oh, I bet she brought you over here to just gloat at my poverty because now I'm like an old beggar. I have nothing, I have nothing. Isengard was taken over and I have no castle. And basically she's like, I've never even thought about you after all of this, and we have so much more to do, and I just think that you're just not taking a chance when you have one right in front of you. And Saruman just, he was a character that was made to go astray, and Tolkien showed that. It's kind of like a moral lesson that when you pursue power over connection and friendship, then you'll fall. You'll eventually lose everything. And that's what Saruman represented as a wizard, whereas Gandalf as a wizard gained everything because he connected and reached out to others, and he was not about dominating over others, and he didn't even want power. He simply wanted to use his power that he had as a wizard to help others and to help Arda, live on and not have the darkness take over. So here is the last part here. Galadriel and the other elves of Lorien faded into the mist at this point. Their gray cloaks, and the mist comes about them. And at one point, they saw a flash of light through the mist. And Frodo knew in that moment that Galadriel held aloft her ring in token of farewell to them. So then you see another form of kindness. It's like she can't let go of saying goodbye to Frodo and saying goodbye to the others that she has come to know. And this is a elven queen of very high stature, but she's turning around to say goodbye to Frodo and the friends that are around him. So Gandalf and Frodo go back to the Shire, and I wrote this: kindness and hospitality. So here's where eventually Frodo is. Okay, so here's what I absolutely love about the actual stories is that there is so much more that happens after Frodo gets rid of the ring, and you learn what goes on and what happens in the Shire and what's going on in Rivendell. And I just think that everybody should really read the books, because it's like adding an extension to the movie that you really don't see. So Frodo is saying basically that he truly wants to go back to Rivendell to see Bilbo again, because that's where Bilbo was, because they left him there. And Bilbo is saying goodbye to Frodo and Sam, Merry, and Pippin, giving gifts to them, because when they come upon him in Rivendell, they see that he's very old, he's tired, he really wants to go. He wants to leave Arda now. And so he's giving his gifts away to the hobbits, and Bilbo produces 2 beautiful pipes with pearl mouthpieces and bound with fine wrought silver. And we find out that the elves made it for him while he stayed in Rivendell. So once again, there's this gift giving of the elves, that even though Bilbo is there, they're still making silver pipes for him to smoke. And he says, I don't really smoke that much anymore. So he gives them to Merry and Pippin, because he gives other gifts to Sam and Frodo. And so, that's the hospitality of the elves. I mean, they might just make some gifts for you while you're staying with them. And the next part is the next day, Gandalf and hobbits take leave of Bilbo in his room, for it was cold out of the doors, and they said farewell to Elrond and all his household in Rivendell. And Elrond blessed Frodo with a fair journey and said, I think, Frodo, that maybe you will not need to come back, unless you come very soon. For about this time of the year, when the leaves are gold before they fall, look for Bilbo in the woods of the Shire. I shall be with him. So this is a very interesting part here, because it said that only he could hear this message, that nobody else could. Elrond telepathically said this to Frodo, where he basically channeled his thoughts to Frodo, and Frodo kept this message to himself, saying that he'll one day see Bilbo and Elrond when he is ready to leave Arda. So then chapter, the last part here, 21, it came time to see the remaining elves again. So after a while where Sam and Frodo and all the hobbits are back in the Shire, and there's a lot that goes on in the Shire, and you can read it in the books, there's a time when Sam and Frodo they were journeying to see Rivendell again. They wanted to see Bilbo once again and see the elves. And so as they were going to Rivendell to see Bilbo, so I guess he wasn't very patient to see Elrond in the woods by the Shire, but he went to go look for them himself. He runs into Elrond and Gladriel and Gildor and other elven folk that were on the road. He runs into them. And that's probably because Elrond kind of planned that, like he maybe knew, he could foresee that maybe Frodo would try to journey to Rivendell on his own, so they would try to meet him on the way. And Elrond greeted them gravely and graciously, and Gladriel smiled upon them, saying, "Well, Master Samwise," she said, "I hear and see that you have used my gift well. The Shire now will be more than ever blessed and beloved because of the Malorn tree." So we remember the gift that Gladriel gave Sam, which was a box of Malorn seeds and an acorn. And she said, "Plant this in the Shire so that you remember the forests of Lothlorien." And so she has this ability where she connects to what's important to you. And she uses it as a vehicle to connect to you, to show you that she cares. So that's why she connects to Sam, and she says, "I see you used the gift well," and she's happy for Sam. She could see that he got married, and I mean, she could basically see that he's in a really good place. So she's telling him this. And 22, then Elrond and Gladriel rode on, for the third age was over, and the days of the ring were past. And end to their story came. With them, many elves of the high kindred who would no longer stay in Middle-earth, and among them, filled with sadness that was yet to be blessed, and without bitterness, rode Sam and Frodo and Bilbo, and the elves delighted to honor them. And then, at the end, you see that this is when Bilbo gets on the ship, and also Frodo decides to join them. And there's this tearful ending when he has to leave, but that extension to honor Bilbo and Frodo and all the other company that's with them is seen in the elves. So that is the ending of The Lord of the Rings. And once again, please read the books. Don't just watch the movies, because I just think that you'll get such a deeper grasp and a more intense experience of his stories and the elven nature and the characters. I went through and I wrote down basically everything that Legolas and Gladriel and Arwen and Elrond and all the elven folks said. But now you can put it together on your own time and read it and enjoy it. And I did this as kind of like a lecture type of style, to show you examples of kindness through showing examples of Tolkien's writings, and showing the characters that he constructed is something very much that we can all aspire to in their behavior. You know what I do now, and this is what kind of funneled the series of What Would the Elves Do? if I get overwhelmed by something, or if I feel stressed out by someone, or somebody says something to me, I just simply think to myself, what would the elves do? What kind of kindness would the elves extend the others that are in their paths? And that's something that can help you and inspire you for the rest of your days on Earth. And I will continue on teaching more about the elven nature and the characters and the traits, so that we can get in touch with something that may be dormant within, or maybe right on the surface as well. So Hananle for listening and joining in. I'm going to get going, but I will look at your questions, your comments, and I will comment back to you. Also, once again, follow my High Elven Wisdom Facebook page. I share a lot of information there. I also have a blog now that I'm just kind of writing just my thoughts that I might not necessarily want to make as a YouTube video for everyone to see. So with that being said, thank you all, Namarie, and have a wonderful day.